In this short presentation, I'm going to give a brief introduction to executive function. We'll be looking at what it is, what the difficulties might be, and then some strategies to assist. So executive functioning is an example of a learning support need. When we talk about executive functioning, we're referring to the processes that the brain undertakes to control its thinking. So some of these functions include attention control. You choose what you pay attention to. You know what's important in all the stimuli that are around that you need to take notice of. It also involves cognitive inhibition, means that you can tune out things that you know don't matter. I was talking to a student at uni who has executive functioning difficulties, and he was saying he just could not tune out the clacking of the keyboards around him with students using laptops to take notes. Inhibitory control is where you can stop yourself doing things. So you can stop yourself jumping up, or you can stop yourself tapping that pen, or you can stop yourself flicking your papers. You can stop yourself doing things that you know aren't allowed in that particular situation. Working memory is the part of memory where we take things out of long-term store and we make use of them as we are thinking in the moment. So if we have limitations to our working memory, it inhibits our learning and thinking about something in the particular moment. Cognitive flexibility means that we can switch between tasks. So we can stop writing something and we can look up and we can listen to new instructions coming in. Or we can move from listening to the whole class and drop back into focusing on a group activity. You can hear how these things are going to have such an impact in classrooms. Executive functioning is critical for planning, so it can be short and long-term tasks. So being able to think about, I need to pack up my books and get ready for the next class, what have I got to do, where have I got to go, right through to I've got an essay due in 4 weeks' time. What am I going to be doing for that? Executive functioning involves reasoning, so it's that higher order thinking about working through a particular problem or a task. Now, I want you to notice some of the features that are used in this slide. So not all the text appears at once. If you saw that slide just as it is now, instead of how it was when it first began, it would have been overwhelming. There would have been a lot to attend to and more to attend to than your brain would have been able to initially work out. So allowing the text to come through a bit at a time helps a learner to focus on what's the important point at the moment. Colour is used to separate out the text, so the heading is a separate colour. Then all of the different parts of executive functioning are in purple with descriptive text just in the black. And so the image is also there as the final piece to remind us that we're here thinking about the brain. Now, executive functioning can occur from a number of different situations. So it could be a part of ADHD, attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, or it could be just a developmental issue that the frontal lobe is yet to develop. So we know that young children don't have the same control that we do as we're adults. So it's harder for them to attend to things. It's harder for them to resist doing things that perhaps they know they shouldn't. But it can also be caused by things such as brain injury. So if you injure your frontal lobe, then executive functioning can be impaired. There's a video that you can watch later on where a psychologist talks about executive functioning and has some really powerful strategies that can help. but I'll leave that for you to watch at another time. I want you to think what works for you. You are an expert in getting here, even if you know you have difficulties with executive functioning. So there are strategies that you have used that have supported you to function and to plan and to organize yourself. What do you use and how are these helpful? Because those strategies can be explicitly taught to children and younger students who have difficulties. So some tips here. Remember that executive functioning develops through childhood and into adulthood. So some kids might be just slower for their brains to develop. It's really important not to punish them, not to react as though they're being badly behaved and naughty. It is a really difficult thing for learners whose brains, they're really fighting their brains to do what they really want to do. And so if we recognise that and support them by putting structures in place that will help them, then it will also relieve a lot of the tension in a classroom. So these kids do improve with time and patience. So what might we do? Here are some strategies. A task list really works for lots of people, and it can be critical for people who struggle in making plans just as they go along. Milestones for long assignments, that's a really important strategy, particularly people in the secondary school where there's a bit of a tendency to hand out an assignment and 4 weeks later see how they're going with a draft and then collect it up afterwards. It's really important for you to break that down even to daily steps for them. Breaking learning into small steps, we'll see an example of that in a little while. Organisation devices such as diaries, even though there's more of a sense of using phone apps and things like that, a paper diary can be really powerful for all of us, and it can be really useful for students, and many schools still use the formal paper diaries. Visual records are great too, because a student can remember what they were doing and you can remind them, remember what we were doing at this point, have a look back, check your notes. And this is an example, this was some uni students of mine where they were taking photos as one of the strategies they used to remember what they were doing, and it became such a powerful one they used it frequently, and it was one of the suggestions they had for other students. So these are some examples of task analysis where a teacher has broken down a task into small steps. So the example on the left is where a student was giving instructions on how to use a graphics calculator, and so the teacher had provided this as a checklist to work their way through, because as you can see there are a lot of steps involved and it's easy to forget which ones to use. The other example is another step-by-step where you use visuals with a small bit of text to remind somebody what they have to do. And this is one way that travel training can be done. But I do want to just remind you that travel training is not a job for schools. That's a job for families and parents, and mainly because you have no idea what travel needs a student will have. So we've been thinking in this very brief introduction a little bit of a spotlight on executive functioning, and I encourage you to add to your toolbox of strategies, because you will need to support students in your classrooms who have difficulties with this, and it becomes more and more an issue in the secondary school, because in the primary years we tend to scaffold students so much more, where we expect they will have grown out of it by the time the need for that, by the time they get into the secondary school, and yet some kids will continue to need our support.